Hello and welcome to my channel on human design. Well, today we have a episode with questions just from the long-time viewers. So some really interesting questions based on the mechanics of human design. So in this episode, you're going to probably learn a lot or certainly think about things in a different way. And we're going to start off with the question from Deep Learning for Growth. Here's their question. I'm curious to know what it really means to have an undefined ajna. Does it mean that this person can never have a belief or stand firm in how they see things, or defend themselves when their boundaries have been violated? I would like to understand if the not self theme of trying to be certain applies to all areas of life, and if people with undefined ajnas can never be certain of anything in their lives. So thank you for that question. And then there's a second part of the question I'll get to in a minute. But let's just think about what this is. This is a conceptual mind, okay? It's a conceptual mind without a fixed way of thinking. So it is open. It is taking in ideas from other people all the time. It is absorbing this and that, and it's not in any particular fixed structure or fixed track or fixed narrative. It is just there. So it's actually it can be quite an intelligent way of operating because you don't have any fixed way of thinking. You can access all kinds of ways of thinking depending on whatever the topic is. And when you say can never be certain of anything, you're talking about intellectually or conceptually certain. It is within this framework that we have to think. It doesn't mean that they're not certain of their response when they get a powerful response if they're a generator. They're moving with that. The energy's moving, and if they're trusting in the experiment, they'll move with it. They don't have to think about it. And think what it is to be someone with a fixed ajna. It means you're thinking in one particular way all the time. This is where a lot of questions can come. So, for example, if you have the 1762, you're going to be thinking in a logical way, often in an organized way, one thing leading to another, depending on the facts. The opinions are being informed by the facts, and they express the facts. They're very good at expressing instruction and guidance and bringing understanding to many things, including to the everyday life things. They can be very good. They can be very good at making one's life easier and be very reassuring. But let me give you an example. Many years ago, I was in Australia working on fixing a quadraphonic sound system. And I was with a 6-3 manifestor was there. And he had a workshop down below. And so we went down to the workshop and he was pretty handy. He was logical. He was involved with lots of different systems. Smart man. And he said, "Oh, don't worry about that. We'll sort that." And he applies his logic. He explains as he goes what he's going to do and how it's going to work. And he, puts things together and he welds it together and he goes, "Oh, it didn't work." There was this pause of, the logic is broken. It doesn't work. Now I'm there with my open ajna. And I'm a struggler. I'm a 1-3. I'm a tinkerer. I'm used to things not working first time. I don't expect them to. I do my best, and we see what happens. So for me, it was quite normal that okay, so that didn't work. What about if we put this with that and then add it? Would that work? He goes, "Ah, good idea, Richard. Let's try that." So we try that little bit of, something that was unusual, something that was not logical, but it was a way to get the thing to work, and it did work. So I love that memory that I have of working with this guy because it was very productive. It was very respectful. We both learned a lot, and we did fix it. But it wasn't fixed by logic alone. So just because you're certain, you have to understand that intellectual certainty does not mean you're correct. It means you think you're correct. You're certain you're correct. It doesn't mean you are. If you go to the 4323, they can know they're right, they know it. And you can show them evidence that they're wrong right in front of them, and they won't accept it because their knowing is more important. And of course, they can know something that can be absolutely profound and really on the button. It can even be something that hasn't yet come into the world. It can be a very efficient mind, but it can also be wrong. And on the 1156, there's this narrative, the abstract way of telling the story and getting you to experience what something may be. But that's based on their narrative. If there are certain things within that narrative that, are wrong, then that will be included as if it was real, as if it was true. And they can be sure of that. They could be telling a story, but they've misheard something or they've misunderstood something, and they put that misunderstanding into the narrative. So the open ajna isn't about being certain, it is about taking in all the different ideas. And from that, they will say what they say. They don't need to be certain. It's not our job to be certain. Bear in mind the filters that you have in the ajna will affect the way that you perceive what comes in. So within a certain lens. So in my case, it's the 47 gate. So a certain abstract wanting to make sense of the confusion. And that's the only filter. So I reckon I can make sense of almost anything. I'm certainly open to the challenge of whatever it may be to get to the bottom of it. So that's what I would say about that. It's not that they're not certain of anything. They are. I am certain of my response when it's in full flow. There's no question. I'm certain of my splenic intuition in the moment. I mean, how could I not be? So these things that are fixed in us and consistent in us, you can think about that as a kind of certainty within that framework. But here in the Ajna, we're just talking about intellectual certainty. Which brings me to the second part of your question. Also, what if the person with undefined Ajna also has an undefined solar plex? So why would they try to confront someone or seek the truth if they are never going to be certain about anything? This is a bit confusing, and I'd really appreciate your thoughts on this. Okay, so here we are in the solar plex, and if you've got an open solar plex, it means that you don't have consistent emotional energy running through the body, that can be both painful and pleasurable. It is a feeling mechanism, if you like. So here, let me put this back to you. You ask any open solar plex, and I'm sure their lovers and their friends have asked them, what do you really feel about me? They don't know. They're not certain of how they feel about anything because they're not in that feeling framework all the time. All they're doing is taking in and amplifying and distorting to some degree what they're picking up from others, depending on what filters they may have hanging about in that open solar plex. It doesn't mean that they're not here to find the truth. We're talking about the emotional truth. So it's very different. It's not about the mystical truth. It's not about the truth in the everyday. It's about the emotional truth. How do you feel? And that's really going to depend on who's around them, how they feel, or if their mind is getting locked into an old pattern, an old memory, and then the same feelings come up again and again. It's one of those traps in the not self in the open solar plex. So that's what I have to say to you. It's not that they can't be certain about anything. To be certain is to be certain. To be correct is to be correct. They're different. I hope that makes sense to you. Thanks for the question. And now a question from Qis, who's asked me a lot of quick fire questions. Thank you, Qis. I really appreciate it. That'll get me going because, as I've just explained, I don't think in terms of questions all the time. So it's great to have someone and for my viewers to supply me with the questions. It really makes things much easier for me. So thanks. So, this is your question. Have you ever seen a splenic manifestor via the 5710 through the G center up to the throat? Care to share any details? That sounds super interesting and rare. Yes, it is unusual, and I love the channel of perfected form. It's a wonderful thing. I'm in awe of it, to be honest with you. It contains a beauty in it, a creative beauty in it, and a refreshing quality to it that I really appreciate. And of course, we're dealing with the spleen, so we're talking about someone who has the inner authority of the now. What's going on now? When it ties to a manifester, you must also have a motor because a manifester has to have a motor to the throat one way or the other. And they're here to make impact. So the impact they make will very likely to be dependent upon what motor it is that's working. So, for example, a good example of a splenic manifester is Ra Uruhu himself, who has the channel of initiation going into the G and then the G going in through the 10 into the 20 into the channel of awakening, and then tied to the 57 with the brain wave directly into the spleen. So, yes, he was an unusual manifester. He impacted people with his will. He impacted people with his identity, with a motor going directly in that and a motor going in there with, a very strong mystical channel. So, Ra, you've watched Ra videos, you can see how he impacts and how he gets through to people. There's this penetrating quality in the 57 that will come out in everyone who has it. So, what if we think about a different kind of will? So, a manifestor with the channel of surrender, the design of the transmitter, instead of initiation, as with Ra. Then this would be a manifestor that would have their impact, awareness in the now, but also awareness of the people that they're talking to while their will is coming out. Their willfulness is coming out through the awareness of the other as well as the moment. And let's say it's going up through the 5710 and the 1333. So there is also going to be an impact there made through their revelations, through their sharing of their experience and what they've been through or what other people have been through. A very different kind of design. And let's take another example. Let's change from the will. We can't have the solar plex if it's splenic. We can't have the sacral, obviously, otherwise there'd be a generator of some sort or the other. So we can have the root. So if we have the root moving from the 5818, 4816 through the channels of judgment and the wavelength, and let's say the G is being connected through the 1/8. So again, a very different form of impact. This is the spleen under pressure, the pattern recognition, the talent to be able to implement things according to their order, according to where they want to take us into the future. So the 1/8 has to go its own way. It is naturally creative. It is naturally eccentric, So this is like a technological, innovative, creative impact that this manifestor could have. That would be very unusual. It really would be very unusual. They may be great musicians. They may be into jazz and different kinds of music and different kinds of instruments. Maybe some they even make themselves because they like the sound. So, one can imagine what it could be, but it will be very different to the other manifestors we've looked at. So, really look at the motor and see how it comes out in the throat, whether it has the 5710 or not. So really you have to take into account the whole chart and look and see what's involved to really appreciate how interesting it is. And each chart for me is like this. By the way, each chart I look at, I go, oh, that's interesting because we are so unique, and I love the uniqueness and how it plays out. It's taught me so much. So thank you for that question. Hope that was helpful. Thanks, Kewis. And finally, a question from Alves. I have a question related to an expression that I hear a lot in HD concerning six lines. When you say that the sixth line is looking to the other hexagram, what is it actually looking to, looking for? What is the other hexagram? Great question, great technical question, Alves. So, really, to answer that question, we need to look at the wheel. So here we have the wheel, and if I take you through in the quarter of civilization, you'll see the 56th gate, and then it moves into the 31st gate. So the storyteller moves into the gate of influence. So the sixth line, the 56, 6, is the line that then moves into the 31, 1. 56, 6. No, it's the storyteller, but it's only going to tell stories if there's a point. It knows about the stories, but it's looking to something else. It's looking to do more than just tell stories. And let's read that. Let's see where it is in the I Ching. In the line of caution, the prudence when linkage has been achieved to honor its new commitments in order to secure its footing. Honesty in expression, living by one's word. And the other side of it, the profound unconscious wanderer, where external yearning for acceptance will unconsciously release the exact energy that creates rejection. A difficult role, where the self is unknown and not recognized with predictable results, wandering throughout the life from one expression to the next, unable to find the stimulation that one could live by. So if we look at the exaltation, because that's kind of easiest to look at, it's honesty in expression, living by one's word. Now we take that and we look to the 31 and we look to the 31-1. And you should all be familiar with the 31-1 because after all, it starts off the new year. So the 31-1 in the gate of influence. In the line of manifestation, influence cannot exist in a vacuum. In the exaltation, the sun does not, cannot hold back its light, and thus its influence on every life, the natural expression of leadership, and the detriment, the absorption of light, that in darkness can only promise manifestation, the unnatural expression of leadership. Very important theme of the times, isn't it, really? So the 31 is like a gate of the leader, the influential leader that comes out and represents people. Ideally, it would be a statesman or stateswoman. Instead, we have politicians and all the corruption because they promise, but they don't manifest. But those that do, the positive, the natural expression of influence is, when you think about it, tied to honesty and living by one's word. You know, saying that we're going to manifest this for all the people and then making sure that it happens. Now, wouldn't that be nice? So if you look at the complete Rave I Ching, you'll see that actually in the corner there is a linkage shown. So that hopefully has answered your question, Alves. And I'd also like to say there are a lot of, in the deeper looking at the mechanics, linkages and chains and how one thing is linked to the other. It's all part of this glorious science called human design. So yeah, we certainly went into the mechanics today. I hope you all enjoyed that, viewers. And if you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll be back again very soon with something completely different. See you then. Bye.